She wasn't supposed to be there, but Karen stood at the edge of my wetlands like she owned the whole valley. Her HOA vest shining, clipboard ready, and that fake smile stretching too wide. She pointed at the muddy ground and said, "We're building a private HOA road right here. Try to stop us." I felt the air punch out of my chest. That was my protected land, my father's last gift, the one place I promised I'd never touch. But before I could say a word, her crew fired up their machines, tearing into the soft earth like it was nothing. Water gurgled under the soil, warning them, but they pretended not to hear it. Karen laughed over the noise and shouted, "This will raise property value. You should thank me." I watched the ground sink under their trucks, watched cracks form like veins, and something cold crawled down my spine. They had no idea what they were waking up beneath that mud. Then she turned to me, waving her radio, and yelled, "Step off this road construction zone! This land is under HOA control now!" The workers looked unsure, glancing between us, because the boundary markers clearly showed the opposite. They all saw it. She just didn't care. And that's when the first twist hit. Water burst up through the soil like the land was breathing. Karen jumped back, mask cracking, eyes wide. "What is that?" she whispered. But I knew exactly what it was. My dad warned me for years. Our wetlands never forgave being disturbed. I took one slow step toward her and said quietly, "You just opened something you can't control." Her face froze. The machine started sinking, an inch, then two. Then the ground gave a long, low groan that made everyone stop moving. Nobody realized it yet, but the flood had already begun. The mud didn't just move, it pulled. One of the bulldozer tires sank so fast, the operator jumped out, stumbling backward as the machine tilted like it was being swallowed. The workers panicked, shouting over each other, but Karen raised both hands and barked, "Stand still! It's just soft soil! Keep going!" Her voice shook, though she tried to hide it. I could see it in her eyes, the first crack of fear, the moment she realized she had pushed too far. The wetlands weren't like normal land. When they shifted, it meant pressure was building underneath, pressure the HOA had no business messing with. But Karen refused to admit a mistake. She marched closer, heels sinking deep, and snapped at me. "If anything collapses, I'll sue you. You didn't warn us properly." I almost laughed. She had torn down 3 warning signs just yesterday. But before I could answer, a sharp rumble rolled under our feet. The water line in the ditch beside us rose an inch, then another, then it overflowed like someone had turned on a hidden faucet. A worker yelled, "Ma'am, we need to shut the machines off. Something's wrong with the base layer." Karen spun toward him and screamed, "No! If we stop, he wins! This road goes through today!" And right as she said it, the second twist hit. My phone buzzed with an alert from the environmental sensor system I kept hidden under the soil. My dad installed it years ago, long before he passed. It never sent warnings unless something big was coming. The screen flashed red. Ground shift, major hydraulic surge detected. My heart dropped. They didn't just disturb the wetlands. They triggered the whole underground water table. I whispered to Karen, low enough for only her to hear, "You just turned this place into a trap." But she was too busy shouting orders to notice that her brand new HOA road was already floating. The ground didn't rise slowly. It lurched like something huge was pushing upward from underneath. The half-built road split down the center, a long, jagged line ripping through the fresh gravel. Workers scrambled back as the muddy water shot through the crack with a force none of them were ready for. It wasn't a puddle anymore. It was pressure trying to escape. Karen froze, her mouth hanging open as the water surged higher and higher around her boots. "Stop the flood!" she screamed, like she was ordering the ocean to behave. One guy tried tossing sandbags, but they floated away like toys.
Another attempted to shut off a machine, but the current knocked him sideways. I stepped up onto the old stump near the boundary line, one my dad had used as a lookout. From there, I saw it clearly. The HOA hadn't built a road. They dug straight into the natural spillway of the wetlands. Everything my father protected, everything the county marked as sensitive, they ripped open without permission. Karen looked up at me, soaking wet, her hair plastered to her face. "Do something," she yelled, as if I caused the mess. "Call the county, call someone. This is your land. You're responsible." "My land?" I repeated quietly. "You spent 2 weeks telling everyone it was HOA territory." Her face twisted. She hated that the workers heard it. Another deep rumble rolled under us, louder this time, like thunder coming from the wrong direction. The entire half-built road heaved upward, then sank as the water punched through the last layer of soil. And that's when the real panic started. A whole section of gravel slid like a landslide, taking an excavator with it. The operator jumped off just in time, landing face first in the mud. Karen grabbed my arm with muddy fingers, shaking. "Tell me this is normal. Tell me this stops." I pulled my arm free. "This is what happens when you build a road on a live wetland." She stared at the mess, horror spreading across her face as the brand new HOA project, her pride, broke apart in chunks. But the part that really made her panic was when she heard sirens in the distance. Not fire trucks, not ambulances. County inspectors. And they were heading straight toward the flood she caused.
The white county truck skidded to a stop at the edge of the property, tires spraying mud as 2 inspectors jumped out. They didn't even look at me first. They stared straight at the collapsing road, the sinking machines, the rushing water tearing the entire project apart. One of them muttered, "Oh no, this is a full breach." Karen's face drained. She wiped mud off her vest, stood taller, and instantly switched to fake confidence. "Good, you're here. Arrest him. He sabotaged our construction." The inspectors blinked at her like she'd lost her mind. One pointed to the boundary markers half submerged in the water. "Ma'am, this land isn't HOA property. It's private wetland under county protection. Who authorized this build?" Karen opened her mouth, but only a choking sound came out. She glanced at her workers. None of them backed her. Not after the flood, not after the machine sank, not after almost getting pulled under by the current. So she pointed at me again. He said it was okay. He gave verbal permission." I didn't have to say a word. The inspector lifted a tablet, tapped a few times, and pulled up the permit logs. "There's no approval here. In fact," he turned the screen so she could see, "there are 3 written complaints filed by the landowner warning your HOA to stay out." Karen staggered. That was him? He's lying. He must have hacked it." The younger inspector stepped forward, boots sinking into the soupy ground. "Ma'am, we have satellite images showing your crew working here at 6 a.m. yesterday, and video from the conservation office." He pointed at the small camera pole sticking half out of the mud, the one Karen's team knocked over on day 1. "You destroyed protected markers." Karen looked like she might faint. Her voice cracked. "This is all just water. It'll dry. The road is fine." Right as she said it, a massive section of the road peeled away and slid into the rushing water with a violent splash. The inspectors stepped back, shielding themselves. One of them whispered, "This isn't just a flood. This is structural collapse." Karen's hands shook as she grabbed my sleeve again. "Say something, please." I looked her straight in the eyes. "You ignored every warning, and now the wetlands are taking back everything you stole." Before she could reply, a loud metal groan echoed through the valley, something big shifting beneath the surface. The inspectors' radios crackled with urgency. "Attention, we've got a full wetland blowout. Evacuate all personnel immediately." Karen let out a broken gasp as the ground under her feet began to sink. This wasn't over. The wetlands were still waking up.
Karen tried to step back, but the mud clutched her boots like hands. She yanked hard, panic rising in her throat, but every pull only made her sink deeper. The inspectors rushed forward, grabbing her arms and hauling her onto firmer ground. She was shaking, covered in sludge, but she still tried to act in control. "This is temporary," she screamed, voice cracking. "We can fix it. We'll just drain it." The older inspector stared at her like she'd suggested draining the Atlantic Ocean. "Ma'am, this isn't a puddle. You ruptured a natural reservoir. You've destabilized the entire sublayer." Karen stumbled back, eyes darting wildly across the collapsing site. Machines were half swallowed, gravel was floating like rafts, water rushed in from the forest, dragging their supplies with it. Everything she had forced through without permits, everything she bragged about, was being ripped apart before her eyes. She looked at me, voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me the land was this dangerous?" I inhaled slowly. "I did. 3 times. You tore down every warning sign I put up." The inspectors exchanged a look. Then the younger one said, "We're shutting this entire HOA project down, immediately." Karen's mouth dropped open. You can't! I'm the HOA president!" "That's the problem. You approved illegal construction on protected land. And based on the damage," he pointed at the swirling mess of mud and machinery, "you'll be facing environmental fines, recovery fees, possibly criminal charges." Karen stumbled back like she'd been hit. "Criminal? No, I didn't know. He didn't tell me the truth." But the inspector ignored her. He turned to me instead. "Sir, we'll need your signature confirming ownership and your statement for the report." And that hit her harder than anything. She had spent weeks telling the whole neighborhood this land was hers, HOA land, community property. Now the county was telling her the exact opposite. The flood surged again, louder than before. A huge sheet of muddy water rushed across the site, smashing into the foundation beams they tried to lay, tearing them loose like toothpicks. Karen grabbed my sleeve again, her voice barely a whisper. "Stop it! Please! Tell them I didn't mean to! Tell them it was a misunderstanding!" I pulled my arm away. "You treated my land like trash. Now you want mercy?" Before she could answer, a massive cracking sound tore through the air. The inspector spun around. Karen screamed. The entire far side of the construction zone collapsed into a churning pit of brown water. The road, her road, disappeared in seconds. And then through the roar of the flood, the inspector's radio crackled again, this time sharper, urgent. "County Command to Field Unit 3, we have confirmation. This wasn't just unauthorized construction. The HOA president filed fraudulent permits under a false name." Karen's knees buckled. She stared at me with hollow eyes, realizing the truth. Her fight wasn't with the wetlands anymore. It was with the law. Karen's breath came out in short, sharp bursts as the inspectors slowly turned toward her. The word fraudulent hung in the air like thunder. She shook her head violently, backing away from them as if distance could erase what she'd done. No, that's wrong! I didn't fake anything! Someone must have used my name!" But the older inspector stepped forward, holding up his tablet. "The digital signature matches your HOA login. The timestamps align with your home IP address. These aren't mistakes, ma'am. This is deliberate." She looked like she might collapse right there, but then something ugly flashed in her eyes, something desperate. She jabbed her finger at me with a shaky hand. "He set me up. He planned this. Look at him. He wants the HOA destroyed. He hates us. A surge of water roared through the site mid-sentence. A concrete form they'd tried to sink into the mud flipped like a coin and smashed against a truck door. Karen flinched so hard she almost fell. The inspectors pulled her back, but she kept struggling, shouting, "He's doing this! He's releasing water from somewhere!" I stared at her stunned. "This is nature, Karen. You tore open a protected wetland. What did you expect? A welcome party?" She didn't answer. She just stared at the flood, eyes wide, lips trembling. Something inside her finally cracked. Then came the next twist. The younger inspector's radio chirped again. "Field Unit 3, be advised. Drone footage confirms the HOA crew installed drainage pipes across the boundary line without approval. Repeat, unauthorized drainage pipes were placed inside private property." Karen froze. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. The inspector looked at her with disbelief. "You tried to reroute the wetlands with PVC pipes?" She whispered, "It was supposed to dry the land for the road." The older inspector lost his patience. "Ma'am, you redirected an active water system. That's not just illegal, that's reckless." Then he turned to me. "Sir, these pipes cross 10 feet into your land. Did you authorize this?" "No," I said softly. "They snuck in at night. I saw tire tracks." The inspectors shared a grim nod. That was all they needed. Karen sagged to her knees in the mud, hands shaking uncontrollably. "Please, please don't charge me. I didn't know it was this serious." But her voice was drowned out by the rising flood. The ground trembled again, harder than before, like something deep below had reached its breaking point. A wide ripple moved through the water, bending the reflection like a warped mirror. I felt the hair on my arms rise. The wetlands weren't done yet. A sudden, sharp crack split the air as the last support beam snapped and the remaining section of the road pitched sideways. The entire earth beneath it started to collapse inward, creating a swirling, spinning drop that pulled debris into its center. Machines, pipes, concrete, all disappearing. Karen stared at the whirlpool forming where her dream road had been. Her voice came out tiny, broken. What is happening?" I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. "You didn't just build on the wetlands, Karen. You built on the wetlands' heart." She looked up at me terrified. Before she could speak, the whirlpool widened, fast, ripping open a hole big enough to swallow a car. And everything Karen had forced onto my land was being eaten alive. The whirlpool kept widening, dragging the last pieces of her project into the spinning pit. Karen screamed as a full concrete slab vanished with a deep, booming splash, sending muddy waves crashing over all of us. The inspectors backed away fast, radios hissing with urgent chatter. But Karen stayed frozen, like she couldn't believe the land she tried to control was now destroying everything with its own hands. She stumbled toward me again, soaked and shaking. "Make it stop, please. You own this place. You must know how to stop it." I stared at the swirling water, listening to the deep, hollow rumble rising from beneath the ground. "This isn't a machine, Karen. You can't shut wetlands off. You broke the balance and now it's resetting itself." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but the next surge cut her off. A massive column of water shot straight upward, 10, maybe 15 feet, like a geyser exploding through the center of the ruined road. The inspectors ducked instinctively as the spray rained back down. One of them murmured, "My God, the underground chamber ruptured." That's when the water level shifted. Not rising, not falling, tilting. Like the whole ground under the site was sliding in one direction. The younger inspector grabbed my arm. "Sir, we need to get you away from the edge. The collapse zone is expanding." But Karen didn't move. She just stared into the whirlpool, her voice trembling in disbelief. "This was supposed to make our neighborhood better, cleaner, richer. I was doing them a favor." I didn't sugarcoat it. "You built a road to boost HOA dues. You lied about permits. You trespassed, and you ignored every warning sign the land gave you." She covered her ears like she couldn't stand hearing the truth. And then the final twist hit.
A sheriff's SUV pulled up behind the county truck. Lights off, quiet, but unmistakably official. The door opened, and out stepped Sheriff Dalton, the same man Karen bragged about knowing, the man she always used as leverage. Only this time, he didn't look pleased. He walked straight toward her, boots sinking into the trembling mud. "Karen Thompson," he said, voice firm, "I need you to stand up." She blinked, confused and hopeful for half a second. "Sheriff, thank God! Arrest him! He let this flood happen, "Karen," he cut in sharply, "you're being detained for environmental fraud, property damage, and unauthorized construction on protected land." Her mouth dropped open. "What? No, you can't arrest me! I'm HOA president! You know me!" "I do," he said, quietly. "That's why this is harder." Karen tried to pull away, but her foot slipped in the mud and she collapsed again. The sheriff lifted her by the arm as she fought him, her voice cracking with panic. "This isn't fair! I didn't know! I didn't mean—" Another violent tremor shook the earth. The whirlpool widened, swallowing the last of the road. The sheriff looked back at the site once, then tightened his grip on her arm. "We need to move," he told her, "before the ground gives way completely." Karen looked over her shoulder at the ruins of her project, her pride, her power, her control, vanishing into the hungry, spinning pit. Her voice broke into a whisper. "What have I done?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The wetlands answered for me, pulling the final piece of her illegal road under its surface with a deep, echoing gulp. And for the first time since she stepped onto my land, Karen fell completely, painfully silent. Karen didn't fight anymore. The sheriff guided her toward solid ground while the inspectors hurried beside them, all of us moving back as the collapse zone spread like a giant mouth, opening wider and wider. The roar of the rushing water was so loud it drowned out every thought. Mud splashed against our legs, the air thick with the smell of torn earth. One final quake rolled through the valley, deep, rumbling, angry. A whole section of trees at the far edge tilted, their roots lifting as the ground sank beneath them. Even the sheriff paused, eyes widening as he whispered, "I've never seen a wetland react like this." But I had. My dad warned me about it every summer, pointing at the swampy stretch and saying, "This place remembers everything done to it." Behind us, Karen suddenly twisted in the sheriff's grip, her voice shrill, broken. "Please, let me talk to him. Just let me explain." The sheriff hesitated, then nodded once. She stepped closer to me, soaked hair sticking to her face, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She didn't look like the HOA queen anymore. She looked small, fragile, lost. Her voice came out hoarse. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted the neighborhood to respect me. They think I'm weak. They think I don't deserve the position, so I needed something big to prove them wrong." I stared at her, stunned. That big thing was my land. She opened her mouth, but no words came, because even she knew there was no excuse that fixed what she did. Not after she ignored warnings, tore down markers, bullied everyone around her, and turned a living ecosystem into a disaster zone. A loud crack snapped through the air, sharp and metallic. We all spun. The last construction vehicle, the biggest excavator, teetered on the edge of the collapse pit. Its weight pulled the soft ground down until the machine tilted, then slowly tipped forward, head first, into the whirlpool. The splash sent muddy waves rolling out toward us. Everyone jumped back except Karen, who just stared as the machine vanished. The force of it knocked her off balance, and she grabbed onto my jacket instinctively. I steadied her, but my voice stayed cold. "You didn't just break the rules, Karen. You broke the land, and the land fights back." Tears slipped down her cheeks, mixing with the mud. She whispered, "I didn't think it mattered. It was just wet ground."
The younger inspector snapped at her. "Wet ground? This wet ground is the reason your whole project is gone. You destroyed habitat, damaged county property, forced emergency response, and caused a full hydrologic rupture." Karen's legs buckled again, and the sheriff caught her. She didn't resist this time. She didn't argue. She didn't rant. Her voice fell to a quiet, broken whisper. "I never wanted it to end like this." I looked at the ruined land, the swirling water finally slowing, the whirlpool shrinking as the ground settled into its new shape. The wetlands were reclaiming themselves, healing in the only way they knew. I said, "It didn't have to. All you had to do was respect what wasn't yours." The sheriff nodded gently toward his vehicle, guiding her away as she stared back at the wreckage in disbelief, like she was seeing the truth for the first time. As they walked toward the road, the last of the swirling pit closed with a long, deep sigh from the earth. The sounds faded, the flood calmed, and the HOA project that cost her pride, power, and freedom was gone without a trace.
The sheriff opened the back door of his SUV, but Karen didn't step in right away. She turned one last time, staring at the wetlands, at the place she thought she could conquer with paperwork and cheap gravel. The wind blew across the water, calm now, like the land itself was breathing again after a long struggle. She whispered, barely audible, "Everything I built, gone." I stepped forward, not out of sympathy, but out of truth. You didn't build anything, Karen. You just forced your will on land that never belonged to you. Nature doesn't care about titles or HOA votes. It answers only to balance. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down muddy skin. And for the first time since this fight began, she didn't respond with anger. Just silence. Heavy, defeated silence. The sheriff finally guided her into the SUV, shutting the door gently but firmly. The sound echoed across the quiet valley. Final, inevitable. The inspectors approached me, their tone softer now. "We'll document everything," the older one said. "You did the right thing warning them. What happened here, that's on them, not you." I nodded, but my eyes stayed on the land. The water level was leveling out. The mud had stopped trembling. The wetlands were already stitching their wounds closed, slowly, naturally, the way they always had. One of the county trucks pulled away, splashing through the scattered puddles. Then the sheriff's SUV turned onto the main road. Karen stared out at the ruined site through the back window, her eyes hollow, like she finally understood the weight of what she'd broken, legally, morally, and in herself. And I stood there until her car disappeared behind the trees. Because this wasn't just about HOA Overreach. It wasn't just about property lines or fake authority or trespassing. It was about something deeper. Something every American feels in their bones. This land means freedom. And you don't steal freedom from someone who earned it. The wind moved softly across the wetlands, carrying the scent of fresh earth, as if my dad's voice lingered in the breeze. "Protect what's yours. Land remembers." I looked out at the quiet water, the sunlight glinting on its surface like nothing had ever disturbed it. And for the first time since all this began, I felt peace return.